there, welcome to the Focus Podcast with Tara Lee. This is the place where we talk about real life, real relationships, and how to grow through it all. If you're looking for simple mindset shifts, better communication, and deeper connections, you're in the right spot. Let's dive in. Hey, welcome back to the Focus Podcast. I'm Tara Lee Eddington. I'm a marriage crisis coach and creator of the Focus Framework, where we get grounded in facts and we own our thoughts. We learn to choose our feelings, understand our actions, and shape better results. Today is going to be a great conversation. I'm joined today by Dr. Lee Baucom. He is the creator of the Save Your Marriage system. And for over 3 decades, he has helped couples around the world find their way back from crisis to a renewed and loving marriage. He is the author of 7 books on thriving in life and on relationships, and the creator of numerous online courses. And Lee helps couples find the root cause of most marriage crises and helps them find a way back to get unpaused, as he says. And yes, he's been happily married for over 37 years. Lee, welcome. I am so glad you are here.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
This is so exciting because I've kind of dived a little bit into your work, and there is so much that is a lot of what kind of I teach too. And so I am just fascinated by your books, and I'm ready to go out and buy every single one of them because it's like stuff that I just feed off of. I love this kind of stuff. So let me start with the phrase that you use because I love it. Unpause your marriage. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what
Let's start with the problem, and then that'll get us to the unpause part. So I have a core belief that most crises, now there are some marriages that are just someone is toxic, right? There's something they're bringing in from their past, but let's just go with kind of common, ordinary, everyday marriage crisis. And there is a root cause to that. And the root cause is disconnection. So how did we get to disconnecting when they start with this marriage where they're feeling all of this connection? So you spend all of this time getting to know each other, connecting, growing that connection. You decide you want to spend the rest of your lives together. You get married. And then you say, okay, we've got that. It's time to get back to life. And I don't believe this to be a conscious choice. So just to say that it's not conscious, it's a subconscious, unconscious, kind of automatic thing of going, okay, now we've got to settle in and do life. And so couples hit the pause button. And that's where this starts. So the pause button happens because they say, we've got to do these other things like, we're going to be parents now. So we're going to be parents, not couple. Or I want to get to a certain place in my career, or we want to have, maybe I want to do a marathon, and it goes on and on. Sometimes it's, aging parents or illness or something else. But a lot of times it's we're wanting to do these new chapters in our lives that come along. So they hit pause with the belief that they will come back to their relationship and come back to the love that they had when they first got married at that point. And I kind of think that there's this piece, like in the science fiction movies, when they're headed out to the planet and they put them in suspended animation and they get there and they push the button and they wake up and, oh, we're right back where we were. And what people don't know is you can't do that with a relationship. You can't do that with any relationship, and certainly not a marriage relationship. So they hit the pause button with every good intention. But what I notice is it's mission creep. It was, when the kids are out of diapers, when the kids are in daycare, when the kids are in school, when the kids are out of school, when they're out of, and it keeps on growing. And I remember early in my career being struck with how many people said, I just thought we would, when we retired, we would get back to us. And I'm like, that's a span of 20 years, 30 years sometimes. And so they hit the pause button, and that pauses the connection. And in any relationship, it's either growing or it's shrinking. It's either growing and expanding, or it's shrinking and beginning to die. And that's true with the disconnection that happens in a marriage. So we hear the people who talk about, we're just roommates. The problem is that when you disconnect, and I have this arc of disconnection that ends, you start with disconnection, but you end in disdain. You just basically can't stand each other if you let it go that far. And that's because you're trying to live intimately in this relationship without the intimacy, without the connection. So then we have all of these places where the relationship has struggles that people think that's what's causing the problem, not seeing that that problem is caused by the disconnection. And that brings us to unpausing, which is when couples say, this, or one person at least says, this isn't working. I want to get back to that love that we once had. And that's where I talk about, doing the unpause, going back to that button and unpausing the relationship and getting back to a loving relationship.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. Kind of just made me think a lot of different things about, like, when people say, "Oh, I'll be happy when you were talking about like the kids are out of
Yeah.
diapers, or when my teenagers grow up, or that kind of stuff." We
Life will
can't,
start. Yeah.
right? And so life is still going on. And so sometimes, that pause. Okay, so help me with that. When people come to you and their marriage has been paused, what do they do? If somebody's listening right now and they're like, well, that's kind of where we are, what do you recommend? What do they do to unpause or not pause if they haven't paused yet, to avoid that?
You'll probably like the starting point for that, and that's saying, I'm going to take personal responsibility in this, and that is always the start of anything, the start of any change, because generally couples end up at a blame frame when they get to that pause. It's you did that, and you've probably had the same experience I have of sitting with a couple where one of them brings up this, you did this, and the other person goes, well, yeah, but you did this. And it's like this ping pong match, and you watch them, and it really is like a ping pong match where you watch the players move further and further away from, further and further back in time. And, what I realized is if I let them trace it back, they'll go back to the beginning of their relationship. And so part of what they have to shift is going, not what are the pieces I want to put into place and say, this is why, or more likely, you are why we are here, but to say, where do we want to get to? Probably even more crucial at that point is to say, where do I want to get to? What is the relationship I want to start moving toward? And you may have had the same experience where you realize that couples don't have a clear vision anymore of what they want their relationship to be about. They've gotten into survival mode. And so it's basically, we're paying the bills, we're trying to co-parent together, we're trying to deal with these life events, but they lost track of what it could be. And so part of what we're trying to reconnect with is partly, where did you want it to go? When you said, I do for the rest of our lives, what did you have in mind? And is that expansive enough for where you are now? A lot of people don't have great models for what that would look like. And so sometimes they have to spend some time thinking about, what do we want our marriage to look like? And so that the starting point is responsibility, and then basically creating the end point of where do you want to get to? And then we can reverse engineer the process.
Yeah, I love that so much. That's kind of, this week I'm kind of talking about, like, in my blog and stuff, about owning the space. Like, the space between us is kind of what is your relationship, and owning that. And I think when we get into that survival mode, our primitive brain starts thinking, it kind of becomes a little more selfish, because it's that fight or flight. We've got to really protect ourselves. And so we blame, and we want, we want help fixing them. Help me fix them. Help me do this. And so instead of taking that responsibility of our own part and what we can do and how we can change it, I think that's really important too. I love how you said that.
So let's spin that out a little bit before you go on, because you said a good thing. That is that our brain gets in that fight flight mode. And whenever you're in fight flight, you have to have, there is a threat, right? In order to be in that mode, you're going to find the threat, and that's what they're doing. So who's the most easily findable threat? And that is the spouse. And so if they're not in that place where they see each other as kind of facing the threats that really are around us all the time as a team, then we end up going, you're the threat, and I'm either going to flee away or we're going to get into it. And those are our two modes. Now, I do find it helpful for people to say, I do want to fight for our relationship. I just don't want to be in conflict with this relationship. So you're dead on to that once that primitive brain clicks in, you're going to be going, where's the threat? And
Yeah. Yeah.
who's there to blame?
Yeah, and you're going to find it. When your brain starts looking for that, it's going to find it. And I think that's where we get, what I call negative interpretation. We start seeing the negative in everything that they do for us, even just something that used to be, something we found sweet, we find irritating and stuff now because our brain is searching for that negative, and that's kind of its job, but we've got to retrain that to not. What do you feel like is the biggest mistake people make when they're trying to fix their relationship?
Chasing. So we've called it the pursuer distancer thing, and I try to cue that up a little bit, and it's the chaser spacer, and you're trying to be the pacer. So that's the chasing is the big piece. So whoever is saying, hey, I recognize there's a problem and I want to work on it, the first person to do that is likely to start the process by chasing. And instead of finding a place of inviting and of slowly warming back the connection, they kind of go for broke. And so they start forcing like date night, big gifts, romantic trips, things that the relationship at that point, the connection just can't manage. It's too intense. And so if somebody is chasing, most people will distance themselves, and the more the person, and that creates this dynamic, right, where the harder you space, the harder you chase, the harder you chase, the harder your space, and so we suddenly have this fleeing piece. And so you named space earlier of finding that spot, and that is an important thing to do of managing how you're in each other's presence at that moment, because you're suddenly changing habits. It's easy to get into the habit of disconnection, of not turning toward each other, to use John Gottman's kind of idea of turning towards. And at the beginning of this process, it's more about turning away. You just kind of ignoring. So on your phone or whatever is easier than trying to interact with this person. And if that doesn't work, then it's often the turn against, which is the next stage in that spacing of I'm going to push you away. And that begins to be a little more attacking, a little more personal. And so the big mistake I see right out of the gate is people doing the chase, trying to pull the person back towards them when the relationship hasn't been able to manage that at that point.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's so true. And I've seen it in my own relationship. We've been married 27 years, and I early on recognized that. My father was a marriage and family therapist, and so I've kind of grown up around a lot of it. And then human behavior has kind of been my love of study for years and years. But so I kind of recognize that as in ourselves, I'm kind of I call it withdrawer, pursuer, withdrawer. Kind of, I'm the one that if there's conflict, I kind of want to run away and hide, and he wants to talk about it. And so we've had to learn early on that doesn't work, but how we make it work is that I let him know, hey, I just need 5 minutes or 10 minutes, or let me get some sleep, and I make sure that I return and we repair and whatever. I need that little bit of space to process. Otherwise, I kind of find that I don't show up as the person that I want to be and who I want to be, because when I feel that pursuing, I withdraw or I turn around and attack, And so if I can have that space, and I'm sure there's other couples that maybe feel this too, hopefully. I don't think I'm alone in this. I know that there's been people I've worked with that are the same way. And it's usually the opposite. Like usually the men are the ones that run and the women pursue, but not in my relationship is what I've seen.
There are some dynamics that fit into that kind of make that an interesting tangled mess. For instance, if somebody is more of an introverted person where they process internally first, that is your natural place of going, I've got to I got to think this through before I say something. And if the other person is an extrovert, it can look like the pattern you named, but it's really as much about how they process information. And so I'm an introvert. So when I say something, I thought it through. And my older brother, who is an extrovert, talks it through. And so that for a long time was a conflict. He thought I was very stubborn. I thought he was just flighty because he would say something and 5 minutes later say something else. And finally I went, oh, he's an extrovert. He's just talking it out. And when I would say it, and he thought I was being stubborn, it's because I actually had thought about it. So that same pattern sometimes gets looped into even our personality traits. Sometimes it's a matter of fears that we carry with us. I think there are two big fears that exist in that are activated in marriage that we all carry with us, and that's the fear of intimacy and the fear of abandonment. And the fear of intimacy is I'm afraid I'm going to lose myself to this relationship. Fear of abandonment is I'm going to lose this person who means so much to me. And we all have both within us. So they can get triggered back and forth. And if somebody has a fear of intimacy, so they distance, that's alarming to the fear of abandonment person who then feels a need to pursue. But when you pursue, you're making that fear of intimacy bigger, and then it can reverse. So a lot of those dynamics they're not just so simple as I'm a distancer, they're the pursuer. That may be how it looks, but sometimes under the surface, there's some other pieces of how we need to understand each other and how we process the world.
Yeah, I love that. That's definitely something we've had to learn in ours because, I think the key with all of that though is just making sure I know that he'll feel more comfortable when I say, hey, let me just think about this. Let's come back and I set a time at when we're going to discuss it. I don't, brush it under the rug till later or say, oh, we'll deal with it later or that kind of stuff. We come back and we repair and we talk about it and we, get through whatever it is that we need to. And we've had to learn that with each other. And I think understanding that what his needs and his things are and mine too, kind of that sometimes I think it takes a coach or it takes somebody to help us discover those things about ourselves because we don't know why we do these things. And sometimes we don't need to know why we do these things. We just need to know how to fix them and how to make it work with the person that you're with. Man, I have like a whole list of questions I wanted to ask you. So, one of the things was that I wanted to talk about a little bit was the resentment and blame loops. You kind of touched a little bit on that because I know people get stuck in this loop for years sometimes, and it can get really heavy, and that resentment and blame, and couples get trapped emotionally sometimes. What do you recommend that when you feel yourself heading into that same fight again and again and again? What do you recommend for couples with that?
It is interesting to watch that. I got into the habit of asking couples, tell me about the first fight you ever had. Not the one where it was like, I don't want to go to that theater, I didn't like that movie, but the one the first one that you really was a struggle. And they often will kind of look at each other and their eyes will get big and they both can tell me exactly what happened. And I use that as a template to ask the question, did that ever get settled? Did the underlying issue, not what they were talking about, not the content, but the underlying issue, did it ever get resolved? And what I've realized is for lots of people who are in the midst of a crisis, they are having the exact same dynamic fight as that very first one. They never solved whatever it was underlying because they would get so caught up in the content of it that they couldn't think about the process below it. And so when that's named, a lot of times couples can see how they both have been a part of that continuing battle, so one of the big things that, and I'm going to say this and I need to unpack it, they're often battling about control. And when couples are struggling with control, it's not because one wants to be in control as much as both feel like they are out of control. And so you watch this dynamic where one keeps trying to find a way of feeling like they have some sense of control, some sense of autonomy, and it creates this feedback loop of, oh, you're so controlling. Control is always about fear. We don't try to control things that we're not afraid of. And so that's a big piece that I see. Another one is intimacy. That still has some links to control. I don't feel like I have a voice in this relationship, because when there's intimacy in the relationship, there is a voice in there. You're feeling like you're heard and a part of that, which brings up that third piece of feeling appreciated, feeling heard, feeling accepted, feeling supported, that I think is often a root cause of that. There are so many little subcategories of this, but how you express your love for somebody may not match. This is the whole love language thing. It may not match how they receive it. And so you may be thinking you're doing all these loving things, and it's going over the other person's head, leaving you feeling unappreciated and the other person feeling unloved, even though those aren't the cases. So unpacking some of those pieces of control and intimacy and feeling heard and loved and accepted are so crucial. I think that to create some targets, I think there are a couple of things that everybody wants to feel, and they want to feel wanted, and they want to feel accepted. And those are different pieces. But if your spouse is feeling unwanted and unaccepted or unacceptable, that is going to create a tension between you. And I've seen plenty of couples where both of them feel that. And unwanted, the solution to that is not to feel needed. People don't want to feel needed. They want to feel wanted. And that's a very different. So unwanted or needed are the kind of negating pieces versus wanted. And then there's do I feel accepted? That who I am is okay. And if I feel like I'm the project of my spouse, I'm not going to feel accepted. They're wanting me to be different. Or if I'm always getting the kind of the shove aside, let me do it, you don't do it right, I'm not accepted too. So I think we just threw a lot of stuff out there, but.
Yeah, no, it reminds me of something that I teach a lot, and I don't take credit for it. Dr. Matt Townsend, I learned it from him, but I teach my clients a lot, is that everything that we're fighting about and the things that we're fighting about, it's the smoke. And you've got to get down to the starved needs, which is the fire, which he has an acronym for starved. These are the 7 basic needs that we all need: is safety, trust, appreciation, respect, validation, encouragement, and dedication. And you can pretty much put all of the fights, all of the things that we're fighting about, is the smoke, down to one of those things. I'm not feeling safe. I'm not feeling validated. I'm not feeling appreciated. Some of those things. And so that's kind of a lot like what you're talking about. And so I help kind of people to kind of find some of those things that what they're fighting about really isn't that. Where are we fighting? He's going golfing every weekend and he's gone and out. Well, what's the starved need? What is not being met? Where are you having that fear, that neglect or whatever? It's not necessarily neglect that you're feeling unappreciated, or the dedication. He's not dedicated to you. He would sooner go play golf than be with you. So we need to kind of work through some of those, and how we each feel that, like you said. Sometimes, I spent last weekend with you, or I did this for you, and he shared, I brought flowers home. Well, that's not how she was feeling loved. Right. She needs to feel like you're dedicated and that you want to spend time with her. So I love that. So what do you think? And this is a huge one, because I know a lot of people in my audience and clients that come to me feel very alone. And a lot of times only one spouse is willing at the time. Eventually we can get the other one to come. But what actually works, do you find, when one spouse wants change, but the other is checked out or hesitant?
So we've already named what doesn't work, and that is chasing. And whenever I watch somebody who's trying to convince or make or cause their spouse to do something, that's always a warning sign for me that they're trying to pull at them. I suggest being invitational. And so, for instance, just do a simple one. I talk about tag-alongs. Hey, I'm going to go grab a cup of coffee. Would you like to go with me? That's an easy, I don't feel pressure. It's not like we need to have a date night. I'm going to plan a date night and you're going to go and we're going to pay attention to each other. That's heavy and hard if you're disconnected, but I'm going to go
It's
grab
a
a cup
little
of
bid,
coffee.
right?
Yep, just
A
a
little
little
bid.
bit. Exactly. I'm going to go for a walk. Would you like to go with me? The follow up of that is, though, that you have to then go do it. Right. So if you say, I'm going to go grab a cup of coffee, would you like to go with me? No, I don't care to. Oh, okay. Well, I'm not going to either. Now you've just created pressure on them because they realize they negated your plan. So that's pressure again. An invitation is truly an invitation. Smaller things that I've noticed is instead of saying, will you hug me? Is it okay if I hug you? Is a very different thing.
Yeah.
I can say I love you in a very not declarative, but a gentle, hey, I love you is different than going, I love you, and leaving
Yeah.
that as a hanging pressure for them. I just want to let you know I love you as they're leaving is an invitation. It's a bid. I suggest sometimes sending a text that doesn't require anything back, like, hey, I was just thinking about you, hoping your morning goes well. And that's it. No need for a response to that. And people are like, well, what if they don't, what if they respond to it? Okay, the nature of any invitation, any bid is they might, but if they don't, that's okay too. You're just creating these invitation points. We need to go see the kids' show is different than going, hey, the kids' show's on Friday. I know they love it if we were both there. If you can't make it, understand, but I'd love to have you there. And if they say, I'm not going to be there, just to be able to say, understand and let it go. So these invitations have to be offered and allowed to be rejected for a while because sometimes you're trying to really change the tone of what's been going on. And they don't know what to do with that. If suddenly, you're both doing these parallel lives and all of a sudden you're going, oh, I'm over here, they've got to figure out what to do with that. That's a new thing. And so we often hear couples saying, I don't know what you're up to. So they mistrust it in the beginning because there is a change in tone. And what I'm up to is just wanted to hang out with you. That's all. And you let it go. And so you're doing the invitation and you're not taking it personally if they don't follow through on that.
Without expectations. You're not expecting them to change. You're not doing it to have any expectations on them. You're doing it and you're getting stronger, I think, hopefully because of it. I think that's the biggest thing is we've got to get ourselves strong enough and stronger. And I think then they'll start to kind of see that and they'll
Yeah.
see, oh, wait, they're not trying to change me. They aren't expecting a lot from me. They're not, trying to manage control like you were talking about. It's just they're being them. And get curious, right? Then they can start getting curious about it and what is going on. So if you could say one thing to the person who feels like giving up right now and that they think that their marriage is beyond saving, beyond anything, what would you say to them?
So I get this question frequently from people going, if you will guarantee me that I can save my marriage, I will do whatever you tell me. And so I always suggest the opposite, that I can guarantee them the result if they don't decide to take action. That is easy. So how do you find out if something is savable or not? There's only one way, and that is to take action. That there is just in that action is the only way to figure that out. So go ahead and take action based on not on are you hopeful that they'll suddenly turn around, but are you convinced that where you want to get to having that loving marriage, to honoring the commitment you made, is important enough to try. And a lot of times, so I've had the experience of having the people in my office in and out, and one will say, absolutely, I do not want to save my marriage in front of the spouse. Spouse will go out for a little bit and I'll say, scale of 0 to 100. 0 is there's nothing here. 100 is it's perfect. Where do you put it? Very few give me 0. If they do, that's tough to come back from. They are they're not just hopeless at that point. They usually have a hope in something else. They've lost their hope. That's a whole nother topic. But if they could say, I don't know, maybe 20% chance that it could happen, okay, 20% we can work with. We can start the process there because there's suddenly an openness. And most people are, at least for a long period of time, ambivalent about the idea of divorce. At some point, they cross that line, but the ambivalence is there because of all the ramifications of it, for how hard it is on the kids, the parents. I mean, multi-generations there that are affected by that. And so they decide that maybe that's not the best alternative. They just don't see any other option. And that's what you're trying to bring in, is there is another option. We don't have to live a hollow life. And so a lot of people have said, well, I would rather be divorced than being in a miserable relationship. That's okay. Well, is there a third option? I mean, the third option is not divorced and not in a miserable relationship, but to have something you would both want. And if they say, we've never been able to do that, okay, that's a question of a change in direction. That you can learn. So Charles Snyder back in the 80s talked about the HOPE formula, and there are three parts to the HOPE formula. You've got to have the place you want to get to, the destination. You've got to know how to get there, and then you've got to have the willingness to get there. And so if they are feeling hopeless, often it's because they don't even know where they're trying to get to anymore. And so if you can establish, well, you could get to this place, then there is the information question, which is, I mean, what I've spent my career, and you probably have too, of trying to say, here's how you could do that. And then the last question is simply, are you willing to give that a try? Are you willing to walk in that direction? So I use that diagnostically. What is it that's missing? And we can fill in that blank. If somebody comes and says, I want to say my marriage, I don't even know what that would look like. Well, let's talk about that. Let's create a vision of what you would move to. And then we can talk about how you would get there. And then the only question is, are you willing to move in that direction? And that works for either side of it.
Yeah, I love that so much. That's kind of how, if they don't even know where they're going or what that marriage looks like, what they even want out of the marriage, then of course you're just spinning your wheels and you're not going anywhere because you don't know where you're going. And so and that's one thing my dad used to always say. I don't even know who to credit it for. I just learned it from him. But if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. And so that to me is like, well, if you're just doing what you're doing, it's not getting you anywhere because you don't know where you're going. You're just spinning your wheels because you don't know what that looks like. You don't know what you want. And like you kind of touched on too, a lot of times we don't have that marriage, that we don't know what we want because we haven't seen it modeled. We haven't seen it. And so here's where I want couples to listen is change that for your kids, because model something for them that they can work towards. Model something, figure it out so that it doesn't keep happening. If you don't have one to model after, then your kids aren't going to. And so let's figure it out. Let's make some changes. And it starts with you. It starts right now, making that change, figuring it out, and working with somebody. If you don't know how, there's lots of people that are out there that are willing to help, that have done all the research, done all the studying, done all the finding different ways. And, if you've worked with somebody before, I hear that a lot, well, we've tried therapy, it didn't work, or we've tried, and okay, keep trying. Like, are you just willing to give up and stop? There's going to be somebody, there's going to be some program, there's going to be something that you find that will work for what you need. And I know there's things that you have in your books and different things. Tell us right now, like where people can find you and what you're working on right now. I know there's some things that you can offer.
Yeah, so I just released the Unpause app not long ago. And so the Unpause app is designed for people to figure out how to unpause. If you're interested in that, that is at unpauseyourmarriage.com. But I've got another spot that's probably easier to get several resources in. That's savethemarriage.com/podcast. So what we kind of talked about, I have an assessment. It's called a GPS tool that helps people understand where their relationship is, what direction does it need to go, and what's possible. We use a green light, yellow light, red light. And the red light doesn't mean there's no way. It just means you're going to have to stop here and get some skills and see what can happen. Yellow light is, this is there are going to be some issues. So be careful as you proceed, not be careful about the other person, but be careful about just assuming you've got everything going. Green light, go for it. So that assessment is there at the savethemarriage.com/podcast, along with my Save the Marriage system, which is designed for people who are just like, I don't even know what to do here. We're stuck, and in a crisis. So you can find all three of the Unpause app is there too. So that's a great starting point. There is a danger, and I do have lots of information out there. The danger is overwhelmed to the point that you take no action. And so I try to break it down. There are three options there. Let's figure out of that. Don't get overwhelmed with information, because my observing people is they can get overwhelmed with information, or they can start jumping into information and assume that information is enough. Knowledge is power. And as I've said so many times, it is not. Applied knowledge is power, but knowledge is just information. And we've got to get beyond that. That's a good way of digging in at savethemarriage.com/podcast to kind of figure out where things are.
Okay. And we're going to link all of that in the show notes and stuff for people. So that is awesome. And it's interesting because before we'd even met, I have a program that I call Save Your Marriage. And it's just a 10-day thing that kind of helps walk people through, find out where they're at. There's a little assessment that figuring out where that star need is for you. And so I have that on my website too, that we'll link also for that. But I love that you were here and shared all this stuff with us, and I hope everyone will go to the links and get these things for your app. I found that really cool. So thank you so much for being here. Is there anything else you want to share with listeners, or anywhere you want to direct them?
So I guess the mindset piece I always like to leave people with is to remember that in a marriage, you're a team, you're a we, as I've talked about in some of my writing, it's a we, you're the team. And if you can make that shift to say, hey, how can we make this a good team? That will be a significant shift towards where you need to get to.
That's perfect. I love that. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. And thank you, listeners. Hopefully you can go and find all the stuff in our show notes. So take action. Don't just listen to a podcast. Don't just read. Don't just do these things. Take action and follow through for your marriage. It'll be worth it. Thank you. Thanks for hanging out with me today on the Focus Podcast. If something stood out or helped you in some way, feel free to share it or leave a quick review. It means a lot. Keep showing up, keep growing, and I'll catch you in the next episode.